I'd like to just start by saying thank you for joining us in person today for our briefing, Beating the Heat, a 2025 Heat Policy Agenda. I'm Dan Brissett. I'm the president of the Environmental and Energy Study Institute, and I have a few thank yous that I'd like to start with. The first is to thank Representative Paul Tonko and his great staff for helping us with the room today. I'd also like to share the biggest possible thanks for our new friends at the Federation of American Scientists for their partnership as we bring this briefing to you today. So thanks so much. We also have someone in our online audience today who's an EESI board member, Kurt Schickman, and he helped put us together with FAS a couple months back, and the stars aligned and this briefing came together. EESI was founded on a bipartisan basis by a group of members of Congress, and since 1984, we have worked to provide information about environmental, energy, and climate change topics to policymakers and the public. We do lots of briefings. Briefings sometimes look like this. Sometimes they have no ice cream, but they're still really good briefings. Sometimes they have fewer toppings. Sometimes there's other things. I think we've had cheese in the past, but regardless of the refreshments, we do lots of briefings on lots of different toppings. That's what whatever an ice cream Freudian slip is called. Everything we do is available online at www.eesi.org. And I say lots of topics, but I really mean lots of topics: budget and appropriations, transportation policy, rural development, methane emissions, the UN climate negotiations. If there's a climate, environment, and clean energy topic that you're working on or your boss is working on, my guess is that we have a resource about it. And the best way to keep up with what we do at EESI is to subscribe to our biweekly newsletter, Climate Change Solutions. The latest issue comes out today, may already be out actually. And so it's available online as well, but don't waste time signing up for the next one. It'll be really great. We try really hard to ensure that our briefings are timely, relevant, accessible, and practical. And part of that is by thinking ahead and talking with you all, our congressional audience staff, to make sure that these are really oriented towards the topics that you're interested in and the things you need to learn about in order to help your boss and to meet the needs of your constituents. And so something that we've done, in addition to big briefings like this, hi Patrick, nice to see you again. In addition to briefings like this, we also have started doing what we call rapid readouts, which are a little bit more ad hoc. They come together a little bit faster. They're typically Fridays at noon. They last about 30 minutes, and they're really focused on like what's in the news cycle. So we did one a couple weeks ago on Energy Star, which is in the news lately. We did one on June 6th, I want to say, with Molly Reynolds, who's an expert at Brookings, to talk about where things stand that first week the Senate was back with budget reconciliation. So those are going to come up. We're going to do more of them this year for sure. Again, Climate Change Solutions is the best way to keep up with that. But we also are very active on social media at EESI Online, especially Blue Sky, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And that's another great way. My colleague just put up a link here on the slide. This is a link to our survey. We'll also put this back up at the end. If you can't make it through the end of the briefing today, that's fine, I guess. But we'd still really appreciate your feedback now. If you're in our online audience and you have any issues with our live cast or anything like that, again, we read every response. We really appreciate the feedback. We have 5 esteemed panelists. We also have 2 members of Congress joining us with pre-recorded remarks. So we're going to have a lot to talk about, and that means we might have a lot of questions. If you're in our in-person audience, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions to our panel. If you're in our online audience, you can send us an email with your question, and the email address to use is ask, that's ASK, at eesi.org. We'll also be doing real-time coverage on Blue Sky and our Instagram story. And it looks like I checked in on the ice cream levels a little bit before. I think we're going to be fine. So in the intermissions or whatever, we don't want it to melt. Ice cream, just make sure you're getting enough and all the toppings. So I mentioned we have 5 great panelists. There's only so much I could say given how amazing our lineup is. But let me just say one thing, and that is that extreme heat is real, and it is most definitely here to stay. Communities are experiencing hotter, more frequent, and more prolonged periods of record-breaking heat. Maybe not today in DC, but next week it looks like it's going to be pretty hot. Not only does extreme heat have negative public health outcomes, it also exacerbates drought and wildfire risk, harms crops and livestock, and strains energy systems. Those topics are, by the way, topics of other educational resources we're always putting out. Together, those impacts cost the U.S. estimated $162 billion, and that was just in 2024. And what do we do about that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So we have 2 videos, and the first I'd like to introduce is from Representative Greg Stanton. Representative Stanton represents the 4th District of Arizona in the House of Representatives. During his time in Congress, Representative Stanton has focused on planning for the state's water future investing in public transportation and infrastructure, building Arizona's economy of the future, and lowering costs for working families. He's a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, and the Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. He was also previously the mayor of Phoenix, which knows a thing or two about extreme heat. So, Dano, I'll turn it over to you for his video.
Good afternoon. I'm Congressman Greg Stanton. I wish I could be there with you all today, but I'd like to thank the Environmental and Energy Study Institute, the Federation of American Scientists, and the experts joining today for an important conversation, a timely conversation on the issue of extreme heat in our communities. Serious policy discussions like this one are long overdue. While it's always been hot in Arizona, here are some records that Arizona set just last year. 159-day dry spell, 70 days above 110 degrees, 113 straight days of triple-digit temperatures, and 6,000 heat-related ER visits. I grew up in Phoenix. I can tell you, this level of extreme heat is new. Arizona had no choice but to quickly adapt to our hotter climate, and we've led the nation in heat research, life-saving emergency care, and future-forward climate and energy policy. But I'm now calling on Congress to fully recognize the dangers of public health, agriculture, infrastructure brought by extreme heat around the country. By neglecting the federal heat response, we put countless lives and billions of dollars at risk. Along with my Republican colleague, Mike Lawler, I've launched the Congressional Extreme Heat Caucus to champion smart, bipartisan actions to combat extreme heat. This caucus is focused on making sure the United States is better prepared for the inevitable increase in temperatures, not just in Arizona and the Southwest, but all across the United States of America. As the ranking member of the Transportation Infrastructure Subcommittee that oversees FEMA, the emergency management system in our country, I'm introducing key bills to unlock emergency dollars from FEMA for local communities to better weather extreme heat and ensure low-income families can pay for air conditioning in the summer. I brought my mayor mindset to Congress, and I've been focused on heat policy that starts local, where the rubber meets the road. That's why I've introduced bipartisan bill, the Heat Management Assistance Grant Program Act, to allow states, local governments, and tribal communities to apply for quick release dedicated to funding, responding to extreme heat events. This can be used for important things like standing up cooling centers or purchasing medical equipment to handle emergency heat illnesses. And I'm also partnering with Congresswoman D-Ariz on the Extreme Weather and Heat Response Modernization Act. This legislation would give FEMA more flexibility to expand its existing suite of mitigation measures against extreme heat, opening up eligibility for funding for things like installing or stockpiling portable air conditioners, studying unexpected impacts of heat on key infrastructure and public health. It's clear the federal government has a lot more to do to support state, local, and tribal governments in responding to heat. But I'm excited that everyone here is committed to finding common sense solutions. While Congress may not be able to control the weather, there's much more we could do to reduce the impacts of extreme heat and make our communities more resilient. Together, we'll find innovative solutions that tackle the root causes of climate change, preserve our water resources, build out clean energy initiatives, and keep everyone safe from extreme heat. I wish you all a meaningful and productive discussion here today on this critical topic. Thank you for having me say a few words.
Thanks to Representative. Yeah, for sure. Why not? There's ice cream in the room. We got to get all that energy out. Thanks, Representative Stanton, for joining us today. I know the House isn't in session, but still, it's obviously a top issue for you, and very thankful that you're able to join us. And thanks to this great staff for making that happen. We also have a video from Representative Sylvia Garcia. Representative Garcia represents the 29th District of Texas in the House of Representatives. She was first elected in 2018 and is the first Latina to hold that seat. She became the first Hispanic member of the Houston congressional delegation and one of the first two Latinas to represent the state of Texas in the U.S. Congress. She's a member of the Financial Services Committee and the Committee on Ethics. Previously, she served in local government in Harris County and in the Texas State Senate. She is up next. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, proudly representing Texas 29th Congressional District in Houston and Harris County. Thank you to the Environment Institute and the Federation of American Scientists for inviting me to speak on an issue that is so deeply personal to me. I grew up in a small rural farming community, and as a young girl, I spent summers picking cotton under the South Texas sun. It was brutal work, but necessary. There were times when I had to take breaks to get a dip of water and sit in the shade under the wagon, anything to get out of the heat. Extreme heat is a pressing issue that threatens our collective health. It reduces agricultural yields, endangers livestock, and costs our economy more than $200 billion every year in lost labor productivity. It also jeopardizes the stability of energy systems, affects how our children perform in school, and increases the burden of local and state governments. It threatens pregnant mothers, seniors, our first responders, and our service members, keeping us safe. It's a healthcare issue. It's an energy issue. It's a first responder issue. It's a national security issue. We must act at every level of government to address extreme heat. We need a plan forward. That's why my office is proud to be bringing members together on this important issue, grounded in common sense ideas that save lives. In many rural and working class communities, people just don't have the resources to adapt or to recover. When the heat comes, they have no plan. That's where federal leadership comes in. Any plan starts with preparedness. There has been strong progress made in places like Phoenix, Florida, and Louisiana. That's why we need new grants to help state and local governments to hire staff like chief heat officers and chief resilient officers, people whose job it is to lead the local response and protect their communities. We're also pushing for more accessible funding tools so communities can make critical upgrades to their infrastructure and be ready before disaster strikes. Next, we must improve how we respond. We must modernize how FEMA and the Department of Health and Human Services treat extreme heat so that hospitals, clinics, and healthcare systems are included in disaster plans, just like they would before for hurricanes or wildfires. We also focus on where people live, because in a heat emergency, safe housing can be the difference between life and death. Too many families don't have air conditioning. Too many seniors living in facilities don't have backup power. Too many neighborhoods, there's nowhere to go when power goes out. And don't forget, the hot season is storm season, a double whammy for many states like my state, Texas. We need better data on these gaps so that we can make better decisions and build more resilient communities. Then we take action. That includes support for small businesses, home upgrades, and other tools to help people bounce back and stay safe during the next emergency. And to tie it all together, we're calling for a bipartisan National Heat Commission because we need a smart, coordinated national strategy to help every level of government respond effectively. We're also making sure workers are protected. Those water breaks I took under the wagon, they weren't paid, and they probably should have been. My district leads the country in construction workers. These are people working long hours in the sun, coming home bright red, worse off than when they left behind. That's why I will be reintroducing the Construction Injury Prevention Act, a straightforward measure to require a 15-minute paid rest break every 4 hours for construction workers. Everyone can agree that a rested worker is a safer worker. We owe it to our workers to find a bipartisan solution to keep them safe. Bills only pass with partners. You cannot pass a bill alone. And I want to work with invested partners who want to fortify their communities. I hope you use this opportunity to build a network, share knowledge, and develop actionable recommendations that will lay the groundwork for the policies we need. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can produce together. Thank you for having me, and thank you for helping all of us build stronger, more resilient communities. God bless.
dynamite, and she set a really high bar for production value. No shade to Representative Stanton, but whoever she's got is doing a great job. So, it is way better to eat ice cream sitting down, and there are some empty seats up here kind of in the middle. And so if anyone would like to come up, if anyone is sitting next to an open seat here in the front couple rows, if you could just raise your hand a little bit, we've got a couple people. Oh, see, look at all these seats. So get another scoop, get some more, I don't know, gummy worms or whatever's back there, and then make your way forward. And there's plenty of seats for you to have to enjoy while you're eating your ice cream. So that brings us to our first of 5 amazing panelists today, and that is Hannah Safford. Hannah is the Associate Director of Climate and Environment at the Federation of American Scientists. She's one of the lead authors of the 2025 Heat Policy Agenda. Prior to her leadership at the Federation of American Scientists, Hannah served as Director for Transportation and Resilience at the White House Climate Policy Office, where she managed key pillars of the Biden-Harris administration's historic climate agenda. Hannah, thanks so much for being here today. I'll move my name tent to make room for yours and invite you up to the lectern.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Dan. You should probably quit this job and be an ice cream lobbyist. It seems like that's really your true calling. Thank you to friends at EESI. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, and to my fellow panelists. Like Dan said, my name is Hannah Safford, and I'm the Associate Director of Climate and Environment at the Federation of American Scientists. Just briefly about FAS, for those of you who don't know us, we are a nonpartisan 501c3 here based in DC. We go back quite some time. It's our 80th anniversary this year. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a celebration. We might bring tanks. And we work closely with government at the federal, state, and local levels to try and drive progress on pressing societal issues. We feel very deeply that public service and policy has a whole lot of power to drive forward change, but that it does best if it's deeply connected to scientific and other stakeholder communities. Like I said, I lead the climate and environment team, and one of the core pillars of our climate and environment work is extreme heat. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about why FAS is seizing on extreme heat as an issue. I killed myself for several years getting this doctorate, so I'm allowed to show you this graph. We talk a lot about extreme heat is on the rise, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about the science behind that. So a big driver is climate change, and when climate change increases average temperatures, we may even just be talking about small average increases, just a degree or two. But what that actually does is it pushes the whole temperature distribution, that's what this bell curve is, it's the temperature distribution, to the right. And so a really small change in where the center of that bell curve is ends up generating a pretty big change in extremes. So you start seeing these extreme temperatures of up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit or more, temperatures that the human body is not equipped to deal with. These start to be things that exist when they never were before. You also start those dangerous temperatures of 90 plus degrees, 100 plus degrees. Those become much more common. So that orange area, which is really small and kind of like normal temperatures, now that starts to become much bigger. And so again, small average increase is a pretty big, could be double-digit increases in the number of dangerous temperature days that people are facing. Climate change is a piece of this. It's not the whole piece of this. Extreme heat and how it manifests is also driven by a lot of other changes in how our society has developed over the past several decades. So changes in land use patterns, urbanization, right? When you have dark pavement in urban areas, that ends up radiating more heat at night. So urban environments where more and more people are living now become hotter. As our economy grows and the electricity sector builds out, electricity demand increases, power outages become more of a risk, which is a problem when you have heat events. We heard Representative Garcia talk about it. If a storm comes in and it takes out your power, when it's really hot, you don't have air conditioning. Now something that was a danger, now it becomes really a life-threatening crisis when you're compounding multiple hazards on top of each other. Extreme heat is also a direct danger to power infrastructure. So both the drivers and the effects of extreme heat cut across sectors. It's a very multi-layered issue. And that's part of the reason why FAS wanted to engage here. We engage across a bunch of different policy domains, and we really try and look for cross-cutting bipartisan solutions. And so I have this illustration here. I think you heard Representative Garcia quantify that number too. We're estimating somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 billion of impacts across our economy annually from extreme heat. We are just getting into the start of heat season, so you already, again, like Dan observed, yeah, Dan's a great guy, points out ice cream, and he also points out the weather outside. It's great. It's not that hot in DC here today, but I guarantee you it's hot in a lot of other places in the country. Sometimes people in DC forget that actually there's a whole nation outside of DC, but in fact there is, and a lot of parts of it are really hot. Even Alaska had its first ever national heat advisory. So we are seeing extreme heat as a threat that is escalating in historically hot places like Arizona, and it's a new threat in places like Alaska and the Great Lakes region that are underprepared to deal with it. The thing about heat, though, is people look at it as an issue that seems pretty intractable, right? Like if it's really, really hot outside, what are you going to do? You can't just put a giant air conditioner out there and fix the problem. And so for a long time, there hasn't been a lot of engagement on heat because like, what are we going to do about it? And FAS likes to tackle hard challenges. And again, we do them in very close partnership with the stakeholder community. So we went out and tried to look for solutions. This was in the run up to developing the heat policy agenda. 2 years ago in fall of 23, we started by interviewing close to 100 stakeholders across the different sectors that I talked about in state government, in local government, first responder community, scientific community, to start to say, okay, how is heat impacting you on the ground? And what are the solutions? What have you done in your community that's worked? What do you need from federal government? We got a subset of these folks together to really come and cross-pollinate ideas and go deeper, building out solutions that federal government can lead on, but that will have real and tangible benefits at the subnational level. And then we brought together a whole bunch of folks to evaluate those policy recommendations, iterate on them. And what we produced in January of 2025, Autumn, my policy associate, who should be listening, January 2025, not 2024. Love you, Autumn, is the heat policy agenda. So this is really a comprehensive cross-sectoral strategy for tackling heat. It has a lot of recommendations that tackle everything from sort of how can we amend our built environment to be safer? How can we do a better job with data and forecasting so that we know where heat is likely to hit and be ready for it? How can we integrate heat preparedness into our medical system so that our first responders, especially in places that have historically not suffered as much from extreme heat, they recognize the signs of heat illness and are prepared to step in and address it? A whole bunch of solutions. It turns out that because we haven't done a lot of engagement on heat at the federal level, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of opportunities to make progress. And it also turns out that when you start by engaging the stakeholder community, what you produce are policy recommendations that have a tremendous amount of buy-in. Our heat policy agenda is like somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 pages long, and we got 70 plus organizations from industry, labor, environment groups, you name it, to co-endorse the heat policy agenda. If you've ever tried to get anybody to sign on to like agree with like a 1-paragraph statement, you know this is quite an endeavor and it doesn't happen without real buy-in. Here's a very small, you can't see it, sampling of the organizations that have signed on. Happy to talk about that more. And so excited that the momentum that we're seeing at the subnational level is really translating into momentum here on Capitol Hill. We're so excited for the new launch of the Bipartisan Heat Caucus. We've already started working really productively with members of that caucus, including Representatives Stanton and Garcia, including we're looking forward to working with Mike Lawler and other leadership of that caucus. There's a whole bunch of heat legislation that incorporates recommendations from the heat policy agenda introduced just over the past couple of weeks. If you read the Climate Solutions newsletter, it highlights, I think, 4 or 5 bills. And we're really excited to broaden that cohort start to make progress, this year, and the ground running as we approach the next legislative session. If you want to learn more about the recommendations, the heat policy agenda, I can click through them really fast, and you can not pay attention here, but you can read them on the printouts. You can also then go and dive deeper into the agenda. I'll be around, obviously, for questions and after the briefing, but right now I want to go ahead and turn it to my other panelists to go deeper on some sector-specific impacts and solutions.
Thank you, Hannah. That was a great presentation. As a reminder, all of the presentations are printed. They're on the front table. Everything's available online. And there's lots of additional resources online too. So you can definitely find your way around. And in fact, I grew up in Vermont. So I had friends who worked at D-Ariz, and they used to give away 2 pints a day. And they used to have a freezer in the garage. And if I went over to play, I would get pints to take home. And there was a flavor. It's the best ice cream I've ever had. Cool Britannia. Get this. Strawberry ice cream with chocolate covered shortbread cookies. I don't know why they don't do this now. It would be, it's amazing. They haven't made it for 30 years, but my favorite experience. Anyway, next up is someone who may or may not like strawberry ice cream with chocolate covered shortbreads. David Hondula is the director of the Office of Heat Response and Mitigation for the City of Phoenix and an associate professor at the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning at Arizona State University. For the City of Phoenix, Dave is guiding the efforts of the hottest large city in the United States, figuratively and literally, to implement and improve short and long-term strategies to fight the growing hazard of urban heat. As a researcher, Dave's focus is on understanding what the social and health effects of extreme heat are, how they evolve over space and time, and how different environmental and human factors shape heat-related risks. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today at our briefing. I'll turn it over to you.
Hannah, I too have been surprised with the ice cream education we've received today. And thank you to Dan and your team and the FAS team and all of you for being here. Real honor to share perspectives from the city of Phoenix, which is located outside of DC and does have heat. In fact, we're on our 48th day of our operational heat season. All of our programs and services begin operation on May 1st because it's a seasonal chronic hazard, and we've built our planning and response structures accordingly. Excited to share a little bit of the perspective from local government, from Phoenix. And while my role may be unusual in the country as a named heat officer, I think my role is not unusual anymore as part of this growing movement to reject the premise, as Hannah described, that heat is some sort of intractable problem. We're here today, and I would argue we're all here today and listening in online because we see optimism. We see that we're on a positive trajectory. And I was asked to share a little bit of what the world looked like in the absence of strong heat coordination in Phoenix and Arizona. And unfortunately, we had too many instances like the one I see on the slide. This meeting was funded by the CDC's Building Resilience Against Climate Effects program. About 5 years ago, we had an annual heat meeting in Arizona. And too often at that meeting, we would see quotes like the one you would see on the board. People were attending heat meetings outside of their normal responsibilities. They would take their lunch break to attend. They would volunteer. People didn't interpret heat as a core function of their duty, and that included the most likely suspects, such as emergency managers. No one was identifying heat as their job. What did that mean in practice? We had the chance at ASU to partner with the county health department on a cooling center evaluation study about 10 years ago. And Hannah, you talked about low-hanging fruit. This really resonates. One of the recommendations from our evaluation was that cooling center use might be improved if there were more signs. In fact, I remember as part of the evaluation team, we would go to cooling center sites and not be able to find the door. We weren't sure even if we were at the right building. 2014, cooling centers need more signs. More signs arrived in 2022, 8 years later, because nobody interpreted it as their job to make those signs. And I take part of this responsibility. I was part of the community, but we did not have very strong sense of whose job is this, which bucket of funding are we tapping into for something as simple as signs. And I think if that was happening for signage, we might all be able to agree that there were many, many more missed opportunities for protecting people, protecting infrastructure, protecting our economy from heat. What have those missed opportunities translated into when combined with the heat we're seeing and the increasing heat in Maricopa County? Unfortunately, it's meant a lot of human suffering. In each of the last 2 years, our county health department has reported more than 600 premature deaths from extreme heat. And you can see that trend has been moving in the wrong direction very quickly for more than a decade. A glimmer of hope in last year's numbers that we finally have not increased year over year, but clearly a long way to go. I'd also just acknowledge Maricopa County's heat health surveillance program as a model for communities all across the country to look at. As some of you may have seen in media reporting, there is tremendous inconsistency across the United States in our accounting of heat illnesses or heat deaths from one community to another, and certainly from the local to the federal level. These numbers are incompatible with the federally reported numbers for how many heat deaths we have in the United States. So we're even having a hard time measuring the problem, let alone managing it. In response to these trends and other factors, our mayor and city council took action almost 4 years ago to create a heat office as part of the local government structure in the city of Phoenix. As far as we know, we're the first office to be publicly funded as part of the general fund. You can see we are there on the city org chart. This is the only city org chart you will see today. Administratively, we're housed in the city manager office. We have a strong city manager form of government in Phoenix, and that implies that we are meant to work across and with all of the implementing departments to accelerate heat work. Sometimes I describe our role as just trying to get heat in the room, get heat in the conversation. We're deciding how budgets will be allocated and how policy will be crafted. So how have we been trying to get heat in the room? One of the contributions that the heat office is very proud of is that we helped to coordinate and author the city's first ever heat response plan in 2022. 2022, the first time that the city of Phoenix had a written heat plan, may come as a surprise, but I think it's representative of the state of heat planning and preparedness all across the country. The plan focuses on these 8 priority areas. It's very wide reaching. I'll give just a couple of examples of the programs that are initiated and the continual innovation that's happening. Certainly want to give a nod to our first responders who have been on the front lines of innovating protocol for protecting people who encounter severe heat illness in the field. They have a new model, a cold water immersion model that you may have seen on the news, and we know some of your local responders are engaged with ours to understand how this works. We're seeing tremendous impact from ER docs and other folks in the healthcare system telling us people are now arriving at the emergency room in much better condition than they were in the past, and people are walking themselves out of the hospital who might not have been able to walk out at all in the past. We're really proud of the innovative work of our fire department here to move this forward, and it's just one of the ways that the fire department is really leading our efforts. In Phoenix, the Office of Emergency Management happens to be housed in the fire department, and we have seen a night and day shift in how emergency management interacts with extreme heat, such that the Office of Emergency Management is helping to coordinate our major 24/7 and extended hour heat relief effort that was stood up for the first time ever last year and saw 35,000 visits. A lot of folks connected to services, including housing and shelter. We saw, as you saw, for the first time in a decade, a reduction in heat deaths, 20% drop in heat-related 911 calls in the city. That's not just good for the people who aren't calling 911. It's good for our first responders as well, and good for our entire community's effort to bring down response times. And very quickly, just to wrap up, another area that we've been really happy to coordinate is the city's tree and shade work. Just this past November, earned unanimous support from our city council, passing the Shade Phoenix Plan, trying to position shade as a critical resource. Almost, we want to talk about shade the same way we talk about electricity and water as critical infrastructure for the city. A lot of federal support behind this, trying to be really nuanced in the use of data, thinking not just which neighborhoods have more trees, but which paths in a park have adequate shade cover. We've really benefited from federal investments in deploying neighborhood-based programs that have expanded the city's portfolio beyond public property to private property. And that includes unexpected sources like the Bloomberg Public Art Challenge, which has helped us stand up temporary shade structures, creative ones designed by local artists in Phoenix this summer. Looking forward to your questions, and thanks again for the chance to be here.
That was a great presentation. I feel like heat illness is something that people maybe don't take as seriously as others, and then they don't realize how fast it happens. And I also noticed that it looked like there was a guide dog in your photo too, and that's also, I would assume, a very important aspect of this because our animal friends can also get super, super hot. We've already heard 2 great presentations. We're about to hear 3 more. If you have questions and you're in the room, we'll have an opportunity for questions. If you're in our online audience, and many of you are already sending questions in, you can keep doing that. Send us an email with your question at ask, that's ask@eesi.org. You can also follow us on social media, especially Blue Sky and Instagram at EESI Online. Next up is Leo Bachinger. Leo is the bureau chief for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, where he works with teams on climate change adaptation, community engagement, and grants. He helped lead New York's multi-agency effort to produce the state's first ever extreme heat action plan and help local communities prepare and respond to increased temperatures. Before that, he worked for political campaigns and co-founded an indigenous-led nonprofit. Leo, we're very, very happy to have you today. I already got your slides ready to go. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me know if you can't hear me or if you hear me too much. I get both feedback. And on heat illness, we released the first heat plan, and a week later, I had heat illness from painting a fence, so it can get everybody. I want to talk about our heat work in New York State from this perspective of one, when we think about extreme heat, we think about cities. And when we think about New York State, we think about New York City. But the state is more on heat impacts go beyond cities. That is one of the core challenges that I'm looking at in this conversation today. If you want to talk about other aspects of our work, catch me afterwards. But it's really this challenge from looking from New York City, where there is a high development, high density, a lot of people on a lot of concrete and a lot of heat, to rural communities and a lot of farmland and agricultural communities. And we really don't see differences in heat in terms of heat health outcomes per capita between urban areas and rural areas. And that's often missed. And I really, in the last years, see a big shift in this debate, which is really good, to pay attention beyond the urban centers too on extreme heat. What is another challenge for New York State is that we have a lot of post-industrial cities along the Erie Canal, along the Hudson River. These are cities that have in the past maybe not as often experienced extreme heat. There is a lack of air conditioning in homes in vast parts of the state, as well as old and aging infrastructure, which makes them uniquely vulnerable as well. New York State is also a home rule state, so you have this layered challenge of a vast array of different communities that are differently impacted across different geographies, and that might already accustomed to dealing with extreme heat, or shifting from one heat wave a decade to one heat wave, 3 heat waves a year, which are radical changes for some of those communities. And so how do we deal with that in New York State? We have 2 key pillars that we developed since 2022 when we started this work. In 2023, we released a heat-specific annex to our comprehensive emergency management plan. This really lays out how the state mobilizes existing resources to support local communities as needs arise to an unfolding emergency, heat emergency. The heat action plan is how do we build this capacity, these resources, tools, funding, data to help communities pursue the solutions they need for their unique circumstances. These might look very differently depending on what community that is, and that's what this plan seeks to lay out based on 49 actions by state agencies that are specific and targeted. So here is this in a little bit more detail with the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, or FEMA equivalent, leading the emergency response and coordinating. And then through my office and partners at other agencies, we developed this plan in close coordination also with the Department of Health to articulate those 49 specific actions. Each of those actions has a designated lead agency, supporting agencies, short and mid-range goals, and it's going to be updated every 4 or 5 years. And with the impacted communities through a local engagement, through workshops, through monthly planning sessions, we organized those 49, we identified and developed those 49 actions, but also organized them across those 4 areas of priority action, so to say. That is planning, help communities plan for, anticipate, and prepare for events, build long-term preparedness and response capacities, address effects of the built environment to reduce, mitigate the urban heat islands, strengthen our institutions, make our schools safer and more comfortable, and then really work with nature across those different areas to help address and mitigate extreme heat and build local capacities. Across the agencies, these are all the agencies that are involved in the plan and have some sort of specific role in this extreme heat action plan work group. And that's how we organize and coordinate across these agencies to really break down the silos. We meet with a designated lead person per agency once a quarter to update on progress in implementing our actions and discuss what are gaps, how do we move forward, and how do we actualize this plan, and where do we might need to have gaps addressed moving forward. And that's how we are working on implementing this plan. It's the first full year that we've implemented it, which that we're working on implementation. We just released a week ago our first annual readiness update, which lists out new resources that are online. It summarizes pretty comprehensively what is available for communities to address extreme heat, and also points a little bit into the next years of what comes next to us. And I give you a really brief flavor of what is across those 4 tracks in this last year and then moving forward. The first and really important pillar here is help communities really understand how extreme heat affects and impacts them. On a high level, we released a summary report that really discusses the really highlight impacts of extreme heat across the state. That is available online on a website. And we are now bringing online, or have already brought online, resources and tools that help communities understand the specific impacts in their communities. This includes exposure maps. These are on just released last week, 30-meter resolution heat index maps, purely exposure across the entire state. This is available at I3s, and that model will be public use, so people can scale this and adopt that and work with that beyond New York State too. The data and the model is only New York State. We have a heat vulnerability index to help communities understand where the most vulnerable communities, community members and neighborhoods and community neighborhoods. And then in helping them actualize these efforts and respond in an unfolding emergency, we also have close to real time and during heat events, daily updated heat health data. We draw on the federal heat risk tool very centrally here, also to help anticipate events, and then combine that with emergency department hospitalization visits that's updated during an event daily on the Department of Health website on the local level, so that communities can anticipate events and act early, because every day that's earlier communicated that a risk is upcoming helps prevent effects when the heat is here. To give you an example on how we work with local communities in setting frameworks and actualizing based on the local needs, we just, our legislature just adopt maximum temperature thresholds, but we leave it in schools, but we leave it to school districts on how to achieve that and provide funding, for example, for facility upgrades to find their own solutions that fit them most. And finally, we try to help communities bring all those pieces together by funding them, analyzing their own heat risks, using the tools we have, ideating and identifying solutions, going through the engineering and design solution, which is a really big gap to access implementation funding, and then fund implementation. Creating cool corridors is a good example for that, and the heat plan shares more information on how we bring those tools together. And so this was a really quick tour de force through the plan and how we try to coordinate and then bring the solutions on the ground, and I'm looking forward to more conversation. Thanks so much for having me.
That was excellent. And a reminder, if you want to go back and revisit Leo's presentation or anyone's presentations, you can do that by viewing the video of the briefing on our website. There are also materials posted as well. And all of that stuff is available on the briefing page. If you RSVP'd for the briefing, you'll definitely get all of that, as well as some summary notes later on. And we talked about a bunch of things. You were just urban heat island, David, you had that cool map with the shade and the paths. We've done resources on tree canopy and nature-based solutions, building energy efficiency, the building, but also the equipment that makes us cool inside the building. So all of those additional resources are available on our website as well. Hi, Mark. How are you today? Thanks for coming down. Hannah Smith-Brubaker is our next panelist, and Hannah is the Executive Director of Pasa Sustainable Agriculture, a Pennsylvania-based nonprofit focused on sustainable farming and equitable food systems. In this role, Hannah ensures that sustainable farmers are represented in critical conversations with stakeholders and decision makers. Hannah also runs, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly. Let me try. Is it Juniata? Uniata? I'm sorry. I usually try really hard to pre-screen these before I have to say them, but I missed that one. And that is a leading, despite my inability to say what it's called, it's a pastured livestock farm in rural Pennsylvania, and I'm sure a very beautiful place. Prior to leading PASA, she served as Pennsylvania Agriculture Deputy Secretary. She serves on the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research Soil Health Advisory Council and Pennsylvania's Governor's Commission on Women. Hannah, welcome to the briefing today. I'll turn it over to you. And how do you say it? You have to tell me.
Juniata.
Oh, it is a hard J. It's like a JJ. Oh, I was trying to make it
It's
sound like an
rural
H.
Pennsylvania, so it's Juniata.
Oh, so if it were elsewhere, maybe.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to get the prize for the most different presentation today. So, all right. So as mentioned, I represent a farmer member organization. We actually serve farmers throughout the Mid-Atlantic, Northern Appalachia, and the Northeast. So as research from the Union for Concerned Scientists, the Environmental Defense Fund, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the EPA have found heat isn't just a weather issue. It's a structural threat to worker health and to agriculture as a whole. Climate change continues to raise temperatures. Heat-related injuries and deaths continue to climb. Heat injuries and climate change are inextricably intertwined. We know from data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that farm workers are 20 times more likely to die from heat-related illnesses than other workers. That's not just a statistic, that is a call to action. To tell you what that looks like, last year in the Pacific Northwest, a farm worker died of heat stroke, not because help wasn't on the way, but because emergency crews could not find him in the field. So this is unacceptable and preventable. And the number one key thing we need here is a plan for every farm to have a plan. Heat is reshaping agriculture and climate with economic impacts. By 2050, the number of days with a heat index above 100 degrees will triple or even quadruple, making conditions even more extreme for those who work outside, resulting in up to $55 billion in losses on worker earnings annually. Thankfully, some farms are leading by example, adapting on the ground and creating a culture of safety. Alia Lasherio, a farm manager with Weaver's Way Co-op in Philadelphia, acknowledges that urban farms in particular can be oppressive with heat and humidity. Shifting habits and schedules can help. Weaver's Way started a safety committee that encourages pre-hydrating for staff, and on the hottest days, cutting harvest schedules from 12 hours to 10 hours. Jennifer Glenister, owner of New Morning Farm, benefits from a staff person with EMS training who reminds workers every day about hydrating, staying in the shade, and taking breaks when needed. Jenny said it best, we treat ourselves like the endurance athletes that we are. This is what care and common sense adaptation looks like, but not all farms have access to these resources or the willingness to change, and that's where policy must step in. There's very much a patchwork of protections across the US, leaving workers very vulnerable. Only 5 states, California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and Minnesota, have enforceable standards to protect workers from extreme heat. Meanwhile, there are no federal protections, and some states are going backwards. Florida, for example, just passed a law literally blocking local governments from setting heat safety standards. The system is broken. It leaves millions of outdoor workers vulnerable. And that's why Pasa and our partners were disappointed by the current administration's decision to pause further progress on federal standards. OSHA's previously proposed heat injury and illness prevention rule would have mandated training, rest breaks, access to shade and water, and heat safety planning. These are simple measures that save lives. The rule would have provided farm owners with adequate support in the development of a plan and training and communicating those plans to employees. So let's be clear. Safety isn't just a moral obligation, it's a smart investment. When farm workers are safe, they are productive. Ignoring heat safety means high turnover, reduced efficiency, and increased medical costs. A healthier workforce leads to a healthier bottom line. We also need to level the playing field. Right now, farms that cut corners can undercut those who invest in their workers, and that's just unfair and it's not sustainable. Protecting livestock and crops strengthens agriculture as well. Rising temperatures reduce milk yields in dairy cows, slashes grain productivity, and leads to billions in economic losses. According to the EPA, warmer temperatures and changing precipitation can affect when plants bloom and when pollinators, such as bees and butterflies, actually come out. So if a mismatch occurs between when plants flower and when pollinators emerge, pollination decreases. These impacts on livestock and crops have significant implications for food security. We need publicly funded research to ensure the future of heat-tolerant livestock and crop breeds. Senator Tammy Baldwin introduced the Seeds and Breeds for the Future Act, which aims to increase public research and development of regionally adapted seed varieties and animal breeds. We know that animals' feed conversion suffers in extreme heat. So adding trees to pasture, or otherwise known as silvopasture, makes the animal more comfortable and less susceptible to heat stress, and therefore they grow better. This practice is one of the many practices we can preserve through a strong conservation title in the federal Farm Bill. So this is a call to action. As we prepare our farms for the changing climate, we must protect the hands that feed us. Several of the gentlemen pictured here have been working on the same large organic vegetable farm in Pennsylvania for close to 2 decades, coming each season to Spiral Path Farm through the H-2A visa program, where their skills and their lives are deeply valued and resources are offered in their first language. Heat deaths are preventable tragedies, and the solutions are simple: training, water, rest, shade, and strong policy. Let's ensure that no one is asked to sacrifice their health or their life for our food. So here are some links that will be available online in the presentation. I just want to point out 2 resources here. One is the Fair Food Program certification. This is a certification that farms can have, that it's worker driven and can really demonstrate that farms are paying attention to things like heat stress. As well as the American Industrial Hygiene Association, or AIHA, heat stress app. You can actually customize this app that has weather-related information with things like your level of comfort, cloud cover, clothing worn, even so you can get alerts, hey, it's time to rest, hydrate, or for first aid, and could really be a powerful tool on farms. So that's it, and I hope that you'll explore some of these resources. Thank you.
That was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you called out those resources. There's another group here, Union for Concerned Scientists. I know there's some people watching online today from UCS, and they have some really interesting extreme heat tracking resources, and I think heat alerts they track very closely. And that's a really cool and interesting resource as well. Your point on pollinators is super interesting. We have a bunch of butterfly weed in our backyard, and it's just blowing up right now. I haven't seen a butterfly. And so I hope it sticks around because I mean, I guess it looks good. It's probably irresistible. Bright orange, it's really cool. Our fifth panelist today is Lawrence Luong. Lawrence leads federal affairs for the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, also known as SMUD. Larry and his team work through strategic partnerships with federal offices and industry coalitions to analyze, craft, and advocate energy policy solutions. His professional focus includes municipal utility finance, power generation deployment, electricity market regulation, and federal grant implementation. An attorney by training, Larry's research on grid innovation has been published in the Energy Law Journal. Larry, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have SMUD represented on our panel as one of the utilities out there that is just absolutely doing the right thing by its customers at every turn. So really looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thanks, Dan. Keeping with the theme of today's presentations, I'm here to give a flavor on how a municipal utility handles extreme heat. And the picture behind me is of downtown Sacramento. If you've ever visited our region of the country, we have a whole canopy of trees that covers the downtown region, which provides a lot of critical shade during the hottest times of the year. And I wanted to just highlight this because I'm going to come back to a comment about our shade tree plan. Just a little bit about SMUD. We are the 6th largest community-owned utility in the U.S., municipal utility in the U.S. We're coming up on 80 years of existence. Our customer base is roughly 645,000 customers, about 1.5 million people served, basically. We're regulated by a 7-member publicly elected board, and we have a very aggressive carbon reduction goal of becoming 100% carbon-free by 2030. Now, that's a very tall order, and we believe we can get there, but a lot depends right now on technologies that we're investing in, and we have a lot of headwinds, as we all know, with the undoing of a lot of the tax incentives for renewable generation and whatnot. So that's still to be determined whether we will hit that goal. But currently, we have a very clean resource power mix of roughly 78% of the latest calculation in 2023 of carbon-free energy resources. So extreme heat. As other panelists have already highlighted, we are in California are experiencing more extreme heat for longer periods during the summer. We're a summer peaking utility. That's when the highest use of electricity happens, with all the air conditioners being turned on during the hottest times of the year. So in 2022, we experienced what was essentially a 10-day heat wave. Several of those days exceeded 110 degrees. That placed immense strain on the Sacramento residents and the power grid that we manage. Across the state, this means that there's record demand for electricity and really tight power supplies in our region, requiring strategic planning. SMUD, that's what we've been doing for many years, but particularly in the last several years with the extreme heat that we're experiencing. Power reliability as the company responsible for keeping the lights on is core to our operations. We plan all of our grid planning to meet expected demand. And what is expected demand is now increasingly accommodating these extreme heat situations. And so part of our response to this extreme heat is an annual review and revision of what we call the Capacity Energy Storage Contingency Plan for SMUD. That outlines SMUD's energy shortage response processes and functions to reduce system loads to ensure that our system is operated safely and reliably. The plan proved vital, as I mentioned, in 2022, when our region experienced 10 straight days of extreme heat and reached an all-time high temperature in Sacramento of 116 degrees on September 6th. Load shifting, so reduction load almost on an instant basis, provided SMUD a critical relief at a time when all the air conditioners were blasting to help meet the load of the entire California region. We essentially avoided rolling blackouts because of this load shedding. And I'll show in the next slide what that looks like. This blue graph is what I'll show in the next slide here too. But our top priority is to ensure the safety and health of Sacramento residents, which includes conducting an annual heat event tabletop exercise and summer briefing. So what this looks like is we coordinate with partner agencies, emergency response organizations, firefighting crews, city and county officials that are responsible for emergency response, including heat waves. And we go through tabletop exercises to identify gaps, address them, and prepare for future events. So that process has been underway for the last few years, and we believe that every year we're getting better at this. It's definitely been improving over the years. Now, in terms of this graph that I have here, what we're talking about is a peak for SMUD system of nearly 3,300 megawatts on that September 6th day when it turned 116, with time of day rates, which are essentially signals to the customer, hey, this is the time of day, the prices of electricity is going up because the demand is so high. Please reduce your use of electricity at this time. We started seeing our customers respond. And so you see the slight drop right here from the peak of 3,200 down to like 30, just around 3,200. And then later in the day, when it got even hotter and hotter, close to 116, the state did an unprecedented request via text to all residents in California, saying that rolling blackouts are imminent. Please reduce your use of electricity. Turn down your thermostat a few degrees. Help us out. And residents responded. In Sacramento, our customers responded to the tune, so much so that the demand fell below what it was at 2 o'clock that day. So that what you see here is essentially almost a 300 megawatt decrease demand over the span of 4 hours during the hottest time of day, when it was electric demand across the California was in such high demand that we were able to provide backup capacity to the California Independent System Operator and prevented rolling blackouts. Right. So this is what preparing and responding to heat looks like. It looks like I'm running short on time here, but just to highlight a couple more examples of some of the things other speakers have already mentioned. Climate resiliency centers. We're working with local nonprofits to develop some climate resiliency centers to help those that are most vulnerable in areas of Sacramento that don't have that tree canopy, that don't have the cooling that a lot of us get to enjoy in the more affluent parts of Sacramento. 90,000 of our 645,000 customers are low income, and we're building these sort of resiliency centers to provide the cooling that's needed in some of these neighborhoods, and also help customers move into an all-electric home usage, so that they know what their energy usage is throughout the day, so that they get these price signals, so that they can help us manage load. Another example is school-hosted community resiliency centers, pairing backup batteries with solar that's built at the school sites, over parking lot structures, on top of school rooftops, helping to provide essential critical facilities during the times when, for instance, there's a wildfire. We've experiencing wildfires. There's smoke in the air and it's hot. People need a place to go in these communities, and schools are a great place to do that. And so we can provide backup power for their cafeterias where they can provide meals and provide emergency services at these schools. This is the type of innovative solutioning that we're trying to do in Sacramento to address extreme heat. I'm going to wrap up here just to mention our trade-free shade tree program. Over the last 35 years, we've provided somewhere close to 630,000 shade trees to our customers in the area, helping them plant free shade trees, up to 10 in each home. And it has been very popular. It works. It helps shade homes from direct sunlight at the hottest time of the day, helps us reduce load and shave off those critical megawatts that we need to keep the system going when it's the hottest during the summer. I'm running out of time, but welcome any questions you have, and appreciate the time. Thank you.
Being able to shed load like that is to be able to do so quickly. It's a great resource. All right, so that means it is time for questions. My friend Erin is around here somewhere. She has a microphone and she will be coming around to you if you can catch my eye and raise your hand. But to get us started, to give you all time to get some ice cream and to work up some courage to ask questions, I want to start with a question. This is something that Hannah Smith-Brubaker mentioned in her presentation, but Hannah Safford, maybe we'll start with you and we'll go down through the line. And that is this idea that there's a patchwork of policy and regulations, and there's a lot less consistency than maybe we would like to have. And so the question that I'll pose to you, Hannah, and then we can hear from Dave and Leo and everyone else, if there were better coordination at the federal level, what would that mean for the work that's being done at the regional, state, when it comes to extreme heat?
Okay, new microphone. This is more powerful than I was told. So to tackle heat effectively, we need three things, right? We need to know where and when it's going to happen. We need to be prepared for it, and then we need to respond effectively when we're in the middle for it. And so there is a coordination role in all of those at the federal level, and then it translates down to the state and local level. And just so briefly to give an example, when it comes to the knowing when and where it's going to happen, that relies very heavily on federal data and modeling. It doesn't make sense for like all the 1,000 of municipalities that we have to all have their own data and modeling systems. It makes a lot more sense to just invest in a really good one at the federal level and then rely on state and local partners to disseminate that information, right? But if you've got any kind of patchwork in the data and modeling capabilities at the federal level, that's going to make it really hard for folks at the subnational level to know where to go to get reliable information. Actually, that's kind of happening right now, where the Federal National Heat Health Information System, NIHIS, that's been a really critical source of information for folks on the ground. But because of some changes recently, there's less leadership and less sustained investment that we need in that information ecosystem. I want to make sure that we give plenty of time to other panelists, but similar things exist when you're thinking about both being prepared for heat and then responding effectively in the moment.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. Dave, question to you. If the federal government had its act together a little bit better on extreme heat, what would that mean for your work in Phoenix?
I think we can move faster and more efficiently with our resources. I'm nervous about how many missing signs are out there, to go back to my presentation. And we've had similar conversations with different federal agencies. We've had no conversations with federal agencies we think we should be involved with. So I think the opportunity for more organization would directly pay dividends in the work we're doing. And I'll also acknowledge that I think the federal government does have an important convening role and opportunity. NIHIS was doing a lot of that work, really filling a void. And I'm anxious about what that convening, who will do that convening moving forward.
Great, thanks. And Leo, you work for the state. So what do you think about this from a state perspective?
Yeah, I think very similarly, the consistency, the awareness, even in parts of our state, the recognition that this is a thing. that impacts people, but then also this access to data and capacity that was referred to. We have a lot of really small communities that can't figure out when an impact is coming, what the health effects are, and there is like really critical tools that can really shift how communities are able to anticipate, plan for, prepare, respond to those impacts. I mentioned heat risk. I'm echoing heat risk earlier. And that is really a good example of how this shifted from during heat waves responding to maybe load shifts or needing to open cooling centers and then figuring out where cooling centers are, to understanding an event is coming and starting to communicate early. And that alone is such a difference to how vulnerable community members then can respond. And so those tools, that kind of data is just a game changer often for especially communities that don't have those capacities and resources.
And Hannah, you work in the nonprofit sector. So what would this mean to your work protecting workers in Pennsylvania and beyond?
I was actually going to answer this question from a farmer's perspective. That's okay.
Of
I,
course.
I think that, weather data and modeling is one of the most important ways that I can do my job. And so along with that, standards that we know work, which means fewer people are dying, and a support for place-based plans. So this requires investment in weather data infrastructure, science-based standards, and resources for implementation. 3 things that we don't have a lot of right now, frankly.
Thank you. And Larry, we'll pose it to you next from the utility sector.
Sure. The example that I mentioned about a community resilience center is a good way of looking at it. With funding that was made available through the Environmental Protection Agency targeting vulnerable communities, we were able to leverage that in coordination with SMUD zone planning on the needs in our own communities to develop that resiliency center and make it happen so that we have a project that will actually open up next spring. But without that type of funding, without the coordination between the federal government, us at the local level, that opportunity might have been missed. And so I just want to emphasize that all this talk about coordination and stuff, this is an example of what it looks like when there is coordination. And the more you can do projects like this, the more you can actually demonstrate to the communities, this is what it looks like to solve extreme heat issues in your community. And it just gives people more examples, real life examples that they can then use to leverage and maybe replicate in other parts of the county or other parts of their state and the country.
That's a great point. Yeah, if you can do it in Sacramento and Phoenix,
Yeah.
you can kind of do it anywhere. I'm looking around for hands. If I see any, oh, we have one up here, Aaron, in the front. We'll just wait for the mic so that our live cast can pick up your question.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the fantastic panel. I've really been learning a lot. This is a question, my name is Alex. I am a public health PhD student and an intern with the Federation of American Scientists right now. My question is directed towards everybody, but primarily Dr. Hondula. How are you getting community buy-in for some of these heat solutions that we've been enacting? An example that comes to mind for me is that I've been working with the unhoused community and they do not like going to cooling centers because it feels very unwelcoming to them. So how are you accessing and targeting these priority populations that really, really need these solutions?
Thanks for the question and kudos to your focus on heat from a public health perspective. I think we need more of you out there. I'd say for the most part, the wind is in our sails from the community perspective. The community has demanded from the city a long time more of the types of resources we're talking about, but some communities have not been able to be as vocal about it, or there's not been a table set for them to come to as well. And we've certainly learned a lot in that space over the past few years. I don't know why we didn't invite the overdose prevention harm reduction agencies to a dedicated, focused conversation about their perspectives on this issue sooner, when substance use related cases are more than half of our total heat deaths. And it's been a really good dialogue with them. I don't want to say it's been a closed door conversation, but we've really designed a special forum just to work with them and hear about these types of concerns, what does appropriate security look like at a cooling center? What are we going to do if we see something, or if somebody is in a certain mental state? How are we going to handle that? And there is a needle to thread, because we are trying to meet a really critical public health mission here in a way that serves the whole community. And if it just feels like it's such a fragile, delicate situation that one misstep could eliminate trust and put us back to square one in reaching the communities that are most important to reach for this mission. I hope that started to answer your question. Thanks, and would gladly hear from my esteemed colleagues here.
Yeah, any other panelists would like to weigh in? And thanks again for your question. If you do, feel free. All right, we'll move on then. Oh, we have a question up here in the second row, and then we'll go back to you. I see you next. And then I see you as well.
It's kind of a follow-up to her question. So I remember cooling centers, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they were actually funded by the Luong efficiency programs, and they were senior centers, and they were exclusive. And so I wanted to know basically about cooling strategies and the role of centers versus kind of at-home sorts of mitigation. And also, I'm just wondering about swimming pools, and are they in the mix? Should they be in the mix? They seem to have a lot of great attributes to decide for.
Great.
I used to work with Swinton's.
Oh, go ahead, Leo.
I'm so glad you brought up swimming pools, because there's a solution to this problem too. You might hear it from an accent. I come originally from Austria, and we have swimming pools in every community, and they're the #1 meeting place. It's places where community can meet and be cool. In New York State, we have what's called New York Swims as an initiative to both fund swimming pools, especially in communities that historically didn't have access to that, but then also connecting communities to swimming, to swim lessons, to mental health training associated with that. So that's definitely a solution in that. To your other question, cooling at home is such a critical component too. Cooling centers are part of the solution, but not for everybody. And depending on what the cooling center looks like, it might be accessible for different people. Talking about people with transient lifestyles, people experiencing homelessness, and what places are welcoming to them, for example. So cooling at home can be really important. Especially for people that lack mobility, that are not, especially also in rural communities, we find increasingly that being really critical. One thing that people often don't think about is that often households only have one car, and one partner works and the other is at home, and then there's a blackout, and what happens then? And so these are solutions where we look at passive and active building resilience, cooling at home, heat pumps for heating and cooling, all those different solutions to get access to this affordable cooling at home, and then looking at the utility side too. We just, our Public Service Commission, without going too much into detail, just initiated proceedings to also make protections for shutoffs uniform across the state. So there's a lot of nuance in this debate, but yeah, these are all pointers to important solutions.
Great, thanks. Hannah, please feel free.
Thank you. Cooling centers, resilience centers, these don't have to be expensive, built for purpose, new facilities, right? So, I mean, people are already going to places like libraries, community centers, houses of worship. And if we could think about leveraging the infrastructure we already have, maybe just a small amount of additional money to provide backup power generators to ensure that there's somebody with medical training on staff, to have a database of places that are open to being cooling centers or resilience centers. That little bit of additional investment could deliver very strong returns on the investments we've already made in our public infrastructure.
Other comments on the panel? All right. Thanks for your question. I'll just add two. Well, first of all, you gave me the idea that maybe we should have an EESI pool party, where we can, pull down some ice cold Pacifico instead of ice cream next time. But for renters, it's very important that we keep up with appliance and equipment standards, because they often don't have control over the purchases, and especially when there's situations where the renters are paying the utility bills and they get saddled with inefficient equipment or outdated equipment that doesn't work, and then they just, they have no choice. So we've covered that with Energy Star and with other things as well. But thinking about the folks who rely on the cooling equipment but don't have the purchasing decision power, is something that I think gets underappreciated sometimes. Our next question was over there against the wall, and Aaron's pretty close to you with the microphone.
You. Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm actually here from Los Angeles, so it's nice to see Phoenix. It's 102 degrees at my house today, and we do have a swimming pool, so it's nice for my kids to cool off. I am actually a public health nurse for LA County Department of Public Health. I'm also a public health nursing professor for one of our nursing schools. And I'm also finishing my DMP with the University of Wisconsin-Madison and an intern with the National Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments, which I saw Dr. Safford, we were one of your organizations signed on. For me, one thing outside of Phoenix that I saw was the lack of conversation among healthcare workers. So APHA earlier this year put out an urgent call for pretty much an immediate restructuring of OSHA and different protections for our workers. And I'm just curious on how some of your research or what you're working towards is also addressing that rework of OSHA, right? We're talking about federal level to state.
Thanks. Anyone on the panel like to tackle that?
I can jump in on that one also. Sorry, and then other hand, I'll leave it over to you. I think a lot of this is recognizing that heat is a different type of emergency, right? So there's some of our existing emergency management systems like FEMA that we can leverage some of that infrastructure to heat, but a lot of that is really calibrated towards very acute types of disasters like wildfires, tornadoes, flash floods, that kind of thing. Extreme heat is a more sustained type of disaster, and so it often manifests more as a health emergency than as a disaster incident. There's a lot of power that we could unlock by tapping into HHS and their medical response capabilities to respond to heat. That also unlocks some additional, we could potentially unlock additional federal dollars for cooling centers and for health infrastructure to tackle heat. A lot of this is in the, as I talked about before, in the medical training, ensuring that people recognize heat illness and then have the tools to respond to it. So yes, I think that's very much top of mind. Other Hannah?
Hannah, yeah, do you have the, please feel free to go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for bringing up OSHA. It's one of the areas where we've been the most active just because it really can help farmers, particularly if there were funding for these plans, to just be proactive and think through the farm workers' day about the type of respite that they need. One of the things I cut from my presentation, just trying to pare it down, that farm that had the EMS staff actually has mandatory creek breaks. So she has a creek that runs through her farm. When the Food Safety Modernization Act was rolled out, that approach required farmers to have plans for food safety and also provided funding for the types of training that would be needed, and in particular in people's first language. And so I think what you're bringing up is very, very important, and we had been working on that. And the fact that the rule has essentially been it's beyond delayed. I think it's just not going to come to pass, at least for the near future. And so at a minimum, thinking through a plan for keeping your employees healthy and what just like human beings need during the day is really, really important.
Thanks for the question. Other comments? Dave, do you have? Okay. All right, we have another question in the back, and I think we'll have time to get to you as well. So, Aaron, we're all the way in the back, in the middle, kind of in the getting your steps in. Oh, no, right behind you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Brighton Mendes from Sylvia Garcia's office. I am responsible for the video.
Oh, take a, yes.
So, question I had is, especially for Dave, but honestly, anybody, if you've got ideas, I'd love to hear it. We're looking at an interesting space right now. I mean, the fact that we've filled this room with people who've sat here for about an hour to listen to heat is excellent, right? But the key task is putting that into action. And ultimately in this town, that means money, right? And I'm sure it means it in your towns too. So one of my questions is like, heat's very niche, right? When you talk to people from states that are not hot, right? They're like, okay, but why am I going to fund heat? I've got 10 million other issues, right? And, especially in a lot of these cities, we haven't necessarily seen specific heat grants. I know we spoke about it in our video, but we're pragmatists, right? And why I asked Dave is like, the city of Phoenix has been getting funding through a variety of means, right? But a lot of these are, if they're not heat specific, right? Where are they coming from? And the better question is, how do you get your heat priorities done under under different activities, right? So like maybe it's coming from emergency management, maybe it's coming from your health dollars, right? What's the best way to think about that? And how are you seeking it out? Because especially here in Congress, that helps us understand, okay, we should fund XYZ thing because it is going to ultimately trickle down, right? It's going to help fund heat, but it's also going to help fund the next hurricane, or it's going to help fund, if something hits in New York City, right? Like, and New York City was a great example. They used all of their Sandy funding. They brought their whole OMB down, and basically they used copious amounts of federal money to reinvent that city, right? But small governments can't do that, right? So if we're trying to think of a way to approach this without just saying, okay, we're going to pass a heat bill and that's going to be it, how do we go about that?
Great question. Dave, why don't you go first and then we'll open it up.
Great video, and thanks for coming. And Brighton has been attending work group meetings we hold in Arizona for I think 2 years now, and just wanted to applaud your effort and try to inspire others just getting into the room where heat conversations are happening to hear the dialogue. I hope it's been beneficial to you. I know we've really appreciated the engagement to cross-pollinate with Texas, so thanks for that. Yeah, I think you put a lot of responsibility on the respondents here to solve some major interwoven issues. So we'll try to chip away at it a little bit. I think federal support for economic analysis, which I think is consistent with the heat policy agenda recommendation, to help understand how much heat is costing us, what it looks like, and have things ready to go off the shelf, I think will be helpful. I felt like when we were working on our last FEMA BRIC application, we were improvising how to do a cost benefit analysis for certain heat strategies. And we're a really big, well-resourced city. I can only imagine if somebody's working on a grant application of 1% of their time, how much more difficult that would have been. So I think having some more standard tools to understand where those impacts are very important. I also think as a named and designated heat leader in local government and this mission to get heat in the dialogue, I think we are seeing benefits where now other departments are coming to us and saying, hey, we're working on this transportation package. I think we could carve off some pennies for your heat thing if you're interested on it. And those pennies really add up, especially in the scale of infrastructure. I mean, some of what we're talking about for heat is very expensive, and some, like the signs, is very inexpensive. So I think building that organizational awareness is important to get there. And yeah, I think it could be just as promising to your question to look for opportunities that seemingly have nothing to do with heat on the surface, but there are some good heat opportunities in there. Yeah, I would push back on your opening statement just a little bit. I think you said heat is a niche topic, and I'm guessing you might have meant to say heat is perceived to be a niche topic, but I can't find a city department in Phoenix that has nothing to do with heat. I can't think of a system that has nothing to do with heat. So I think it is everywhere all at the same time, which is a different challenge. But I think there are many stakeholders that have a seat at the table by default. We just need to expose them to that idea.
Go ahead, Leon.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of on point there. I think some examples that I might be a little bit more adding to that is like one example is the city of Buffalo had a big snowstorm that was widely, I think, received in the news with a lot of fatalities, sadly. That city is a key partner in our work because cooling centers can be warming centers and we can co-articulate those solutions. And the more we design, broadly speaking, on building on this example, solutions that solve multiple problems that communities articulate, the better off we are anyways. So USDA has been a long-time partner, or we work a lot through our ag and markets or forestry service partners on solutions to green communities, to work with our soil and water conservation districts and rural communities. The BRACE program is a really great vehicle to work through local health departments on some of the solutions that can address extreme heat, but other community needs too. Mobile clinics is a really great example that helps us reach into more remote communities, which is we continue to try to crack too. And HMP, hazard mitigation planning, and folding it into these existing infrastructures has been for us a lot of recipe for success, and that across the board, from really small rural communities in the Adirondacks that think about being washed up out on a road with the storm, but then you have a heat wave on top of that. So how do you get to a hospital, or how do you get Meals on Wheel home to a senior that's suffering in that heat? So there's a lot of opportunity for synergy everywhere, to your points. Yeah.
Other comments on the panel? All right, so we're a little bit, so first of all, a great question. I'll only push back. We've been doing this for 95 minutes, not an hour. But there's still one more question out there. And so if you can ask your question very briefly, we've been here so long that people who didn't even attend the rest of the briefing are having our ice cream. So you'll have to at least listen to this last question and the answers.
Yeah, just real quick. And first of all, Mark Foley with the Union of Concerned Scientists. So first of all, thank you to the FAS for including us in that policy agenda, and to Hannah for including our resources in your PowerPoint and more in there. So I'm curious, in the heat agenda, there was the mention of a strong rule, including on OSHA. And I know that in previous Congresses, there's been the Asuncion Valdivia Heat Illness and Fatality Prevention Act. Is that something else that maybe this audience should be keeping in mind for supporting when it comes when it gets introduced? And then I'm just curious if anyone at the local level has any input on impacts they're seeing, such as cuts to the LIHEAP program staffing, if they're seeing that on the ground thus far.
Thanks for your question. Hannah, go ahead. And then if you have a response to the question, that's great. But also if you have any final thoughts that you would like to leave, we'll go down through the rest of the panel.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. So like I said, a lot of legislative activity going on. I think that even as we've seen the executive branch step away from strong heat action, we've seen congressional champions step up. So the act that you mentioned, again, formation of the Bipartisan Extreme Heat Caucus, a couple of just recent examples. We're also seeing a lot of state and local actors step up to fill that gap too. So some states and localities, depending on whether they're a preemption state or not, have more or less capacity to implement their own heat standards. But states and jurisdictions that have that capacity are increasingly exchanging best practices with each other. Hey, here's what needs to be sort of like the backbone of a model heat standard. We think everybody needs this. Here's what are some like science-backed temperature thresholds. And then here are the pieces that are sort of more adaptable to your local climate, your local geography. And it is hard to be the first out the gate. It's much easier when you are part of a coalition or network that's working together towards the same goal.
Thanks. Dave, comment in response to the question or just a final thought?
Just in response to the question, while we're not the direct LIHEAP administrators in Phoenix, we hear from the community that we were previously only meeting a microscopic share of demand to begin with. So add additional disruptions and complications on top of that. And I think Sunbelt communities, with the way the formulas work, have been especially disadvantaged, recognizing that we all need a bigger pot for LIHEAP. Thanks.
Leo, same to you.
I think I concur with what was said.
Very good. Hannah Smith-Brubaker, final thought or response to the question? Nope.
I'll just say that I think during these times, we're really finding out the importance of coming together as community, even when we don't have the resources that we might have in the past. We've done some listening sessions with farmers. If we ask farmers, climate has one of the biggest impacts on their farm, whether it's
economic, environmental production. And so I'm seeing more and more how farmers are coming together and really trying to support each other to figure out these solutions. So it is happening. I wish that maybe the momentum we had going hadn't been disrupted, but it is happening.
Thanks. And Larry, if you have a final thought or anything you'd like to share with our audience, I think this gives you the last word on the panel today.
I just think this is really encouraging. This is the first time that I've participated in any panel addressing specifically heat. And as we all have heard, heat is a byproduct and an issue all of in of itself. And I'm very encouraged that we were able to get all these different voices into the room to address something that we've been dealing with as a utility for years in different ways. And now it's coming to a head as heat as its own topic, deserving of attention and resources. And I think going forward, in answer to one of the earlier questions as well, it's up to us to think creatively how we address this issue. And it's not going to be a heat source of funding. It could be a wildfire piece of legislation. It could be a healthcare issue or a housing development issue. All those things can feed into funding and resourcing of maybe a person within an organization or locality to address heat. But at the very least, we're talking about it now. And I think it only is going to grow from here. The types of creative solutions that can come from multiple voices at the table addressing something as significant as heat.
That's a great place to leave it. Thank you, the 5 of you, for being tremendous panelists today. Great job. Yeah, that was just great. I'd also like to say thanks once again to Representative Tonko for help with the room today. Thanks very much. Thanks to Representatives Stanton and Garcia for a big part of our program today. We'd also been working with Senator Ruben Gallego's office. He wasn't able to join us today. They just had a new baby, I think on Friday. But we've been working with that office too, and they're doing some really, really great stuff. I think, Hannah, you mentioned our newsletter today. We did, in fact, highlight a bunch of bills that have been introduced on the House side. Some of those were previously introduced on the Senate side by Senator Gay. So great stuff there. So thanks to all of the staff who helped their bosses be a part of it. Larry, you just said you were impressed that I think you said all these different pieces in the room. Well, that's because I have really great colleagues and they put a lot of work into this briefing. So thanks to Dan O and to Amory and to Allison and to Hannah and to Anna and Nicole for all their help today. Yes, for sure. We are also in the thick of it, summer intern season, and we have amazing interns. Aaron, who is helping us with the microphone. Isabel's around here somewhere, presumably helping with social media, way in the back. And Jasmine, no one's ever kept better time than you today. So thank you, Jasmine, for all of your help. We also have a few younger folks hanging out with us today as well, shadowing us. So thanks to Stella and Robbie for hanging out with us today. This briefing would not have been possible without our partnership with the Federation of American Scientists. So Hannah, obviously you were a huge part of that, but Grace, you were as well. We really appreciate you and the rest of the FAS team, Federation of American Scientists.
And I do also have to call out Autumn, who did an excellent job preparing my slides, and I should have caught the typo, but Autumn is also a core member of our HEAT team. So Grace is in the room, and then Autumn is actually delivering remarks at a different HEAT event up in New York.
Cool. Very good. Well, again, thank you so much for your partnership today, and we really appreciate it. And thanks again to Kurt Schickman. He's a member of our board of directors, and he helped put us in touch with you all a couple months ago. And then finally, thanks to Troy, the videographer in the back of the room who makes it happen. And thanks to the folks with House Catering for keeping our ice cream nice and cold. We are, this is a survey. I put this up at the beginning. A lot of you made it all the way through. We're at like the 100-minute mark at this point. So it's pretty great. I think we all need a water break. But if you have a moment to take the survey, we really appreciate it. It only takes a few moments. If you have any thoughts about the programming today, if you had any issues with the live cast or the video, please let us know. We read every response. Our next event is our big event, our main event of the summer. and that's the 2025 Congressional Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Policy Forum Expo and reception takes place. The policy forum takes place in this room on Thursday, July 24th. The exhibition takes place around the corner in the Rayburn Foyer all day on the 24th. And then there's also a reception in the Rayburn Foyer. We'll have 8 panels over the course of the day, dozens of experts, dozens of exhibitors, and a really fun reception. The expo really does everything and has it all. Be sure to RSVP for that. Stop by for as much or as little of it as you can, but hopefully as much as you can, because it will be a really great event. And it's our next, I think, scheduled briefing type event on the calendar. With that, we will wrap up. Sorry for going a few more minutes than usual over than we normally do, but thanks again to our panelists. Thanks to the Federation of American Scientists, and thanks for you all here in the person and our online audience for joining us. Stay cool out there.